Montreal has constantly been on the trade block day after day, week after week, but an article dropped today suggesting they could trade a first-round draft pick and pretty soon from the Calgary Flames. We're going to get into this whole scenario and how this makes a ton of sense for Montreal to do in the very near future. Plus, a top 10 list of Montreal prospects was written at Daily Faceoff, and there are some somewhat surprising choices. We're going to break down all this great stuff coming up on this episode of Habs Digest, and we're just going to get straight into it. And I want to start with this. And first of all, the Habs prospect pool is exciting. We all know that, but to see it on paper, to see the Montreal Canadiens top 10 prospect list, and a lot of these guys would probably be easily top 5 for a bunch of other teams. It's so nice to put it down and see it in words. But Steven Ellis at Daily Faceoff, I've linked this article down below. As always, please go check it out. It's an awesome stuff. He also did an AMA on Reddit answering some questions about the article, so I suggest you guys go check it out. But he, on Daily Faceoff, broke down the positives and negatives of the Habs prospect pool and the top 10. I'm going to start with some of his quotes on the positives and negatives. He basically said the pure depth is exciting, and most of the top 10 listed below, which I'll get into in a minute, play a significant number of NHL games, 2 high-end defensive prospects, a potential Carey Price replacement. That's some high praise, and one of the best prospects in the game, and Ivan Demidov. Matched all together, there's so much to love about the talent in this group. He also goes on to say that the guys outside the top 10 still could be solid NHLers. As for the negatives, he said Montreal's struggling on the left wing, but he can see Sean Farrell and Florian Xhekaj carving out careers. They have Slaf and Gallagher with the big club, but he'd like to see them target the left side in future drafts. That's just him being nitpicky. Yeah, okay, it is what it is. Not everything can be flowers and roses and beautiful. But let's get into his actual list, because that's what we're all in. Sorry, it's a solo video today. I'm not used to that. So we got Ivan Demidov at number 1. Absolutely no surprise anywhere. Hudson at 2, Reinbacher 3, Hage 4, Fowler 5. I would argue Fowler could be above Hage. It is what it is. But where I want to draw your attention, first of all, I think Joshua Roy could probably be higher. I think he could be higher than Hage, though I'm not even really sure. But Sean Farrell over Oliver Kapanen is very interesting, and he was actually asked on Reddit about this, like, why does he choose that? Well, he said about Sean Farrell that the skill is just there. He sees Kapanen topping out as a bottom 6 forward, but a good one. You know, at Kapanen's peak, he'll be a solid bottom 6 forward, which I think is kind of fair, you know. I think when we think, oh, middle 6 upside, I think that's, you know, reaching for the stars a bit with some of these guys. And again, Kapanen's success did come in a bit of a small sample size, but Sean Farrell is 5'9". He has the skill, he just could not put it together with Laval last year. But he's one of these guys that we saw show flashes of brilliance. Of course, he was a finalist for the Hobey Baker in his final year in the NCAA. So to have him there at number 9 is a little bit interesting to me. I would probably have him lower. I would probably bring a guy like Bogdan Konyushkov that we don't even see on this list into the mix. We got guys like Mesar who are also just in the honorable mentions. I mean, look, if I'm looking at this list, you know, we did this whole tier list together, everyone. We all know Demidov and Hudson were the S tier. I think we had, Hage, Fowler, I think Mailloux in the A tier. I actually think we had Roy in the B tier. So not only do I think Mailloux could arguably move up, Roy could maybe move up, but that's kind of maybe my opinion. I don't even know. I think there's other guys outside this list who can move up as well. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and reactions to this list, because it is really interesting. I think I would definitely have Bogdan on here, and I think I would bump Sean Farrell off, because for me, even though Sean Farrell oozes potential, he oozes skill, it's going to take him a while to acclimate to this, you know, more physical, faster AHL/NHL game. But I can see his reasoning with Farrell, honestly. That's the thing with Montreal, is that there's so much depth in this pool that any of these guys could take the jump and we might not even see it coming. Just like with Oliver Kapanen. He was kind of deemed a B/C tier prospect until he had an amazing second half of the season and amazing playoffs over in Europe, and then he had a phenomenal World Championship. So guys can jump up out of nowhere, and honestly, with Sean Farrell's skill, he's really just a bit of adjustment away from potentially being a force on the Laval Rocket. But we'll see. He's another small forward. I don't know if Montreal needs it, but let me know your thoughts and reactions to this whole list down below, as we're going to move into the other topic of the video here. And we're going to talk about an article written by Marco D'Amico today as well, linked down below. As always, I suggest you please go read these articles, give the authors the credit they deserve, because it's a lot of fantastic stuff. But we know Montreal has been in trade talks all summer, it feels like, right? Whether it's Rutger McGroarty, whether it's Patrick Laine, whether it's Marty Necas, there's all kinds of stuff. And we also know that Montreal has, well, they're fortunate enough, if we take a look here at the draft picks Montreal has just in 2025, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 3 thirds, 2 fourths. And we're at the point now where Montreal is about to come out of this rebuild, right? So these draft picks, while it's good to have such a big, deep prospect pool like Montreal has, there is a tipping point of where you have too many guys that are blocking each other. So this second first-round pick that we have in 2025, well, it comes from Calgary. And I want to bring up some quotes that Marco D'Amico had about this. So he said, Montreal will receive Calgary's first-round pick if the pick is not a top 10 pick. But if the pick is a top 10 pick in June next year, the Habs would get Florida's 2025 first-rounder. So to put it all together, the worse Calgary does, the more likely the Canadiens will be receiving Florida's 2025 first-rounder next season. And when we think about Florida, I'm pretty sure a lot of places have them as the favorite to win the Stanley Cup for good reason, right? Florida is a phenomenal team. I don't expect any kind of regression from them this coming season. I expect them to put it together, maybe even be better, which is a bit scary to think about. But Florida, if they won the Cup, they could win it again. And if you're Montreal, a late first-round pick isn't going to do you much good. At best, this pick is top 10 protected this year, right? So at best, Montreal gets the 11th overall pick from Calgary, if that's roughly where Calgary finishes. So, when you think about it in the long run, a trade may be absolutely perfect because Montreal in the past, as Marco said in this article, they have used this kind of extra draft capital to move for players. They moved Romanov plus some picks, and they ended up getting Dach in a mishmash of trades there. They traded Lehkonen and for Barron, which is a bit different, but they also traded Newhook, right? And traded for Newhook using some draft picks as well. So these higher draft picks could be very valuable. And to a team like Montreal, to have another late first could be good. I know we traded up this year to get Michael Hage at 21. We traded up from, I think, 26, right? That was the Winnipeg pick. And then also, Montreal has a guy like Filip Mesar, who was a late first round pick. Yeah, Beck, who was sort of an early second round pick. These kind of picks in this region, they can be good. But for a team like Montreal, who already has so many of these types of players, moving this pick makes way more sense. And if I bring back up, there we go. I got to get used to the one person thing. I keep bringing up the two person. That's my fault. But if I bring up what Montreal's next year's draft looks like, it's like they're still going to have another early second round pick because Montreal's probably not going to make the playoffs. Though again, I know a lot of fans think they very well could, and it is very well possible. I don't really see it happening, but Montreal could be on the verge of the playoffs, but they'll probably be pretty bad. So if they get a good second round pick, which will be their own pick, which will be pretty high in the second round, what's the need for that later first round pick? Again, if Calgary ends up doing really bad, which I think a lot of people are expecting some regression from the Flames, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Trade this pick. And there's a lot of teams that really value that late first round pick, a lot more than a team like Montreal would. So all in all, this makes perfect sense from Marco D'Amico. It's a fantastic article, a nice little thought piece, because honestly, I kind of forgot about this pick, because every time I think about this pick, if you guys are like me at all, I get confused with the different protections that were on it and all this crazy stuff in that Monahan trade, but it is what it is. So now that pick is coming up. That pick is going to be valuable. Any first-round pick is valuable to a lot of teams, even a late first-round pick, especially for teams that want to be competitive. So Montreal has the ability now, this is just a perfect situation, right? The best time to get a young player or, a breakout kind of prospect or a decent prospect in general, the best time to get them is from a competing team who doesn't really want to wait for the timeline for that player. And a competing team is the kind of team that may want to add an extra first-round pick to bolster some of their prospect pool that fits the timeline maybe better, right? Maybe is 3-4 years younger than the player they have now. Anyway, this is all just thinking about the future, but it does get me so pumped. It gets me so pumped to think that Montreal not only already has one of the best prospect pools in the NHL, not only has one of the best prospects in the NHL in Ivan Demidov, but also has some of the most draft capital. I think it might even be the most for this upcoming draft, though I could be wrong. I think it is, at least in the top 3 or 4 rounds. They are one of the best setup teams for the future, and a trade is certainly very likely to happen with this pick. Let me know down below, what do you think about trading this Calgary pick? Because a lot of teams, I know it could end up being number 11, which would be amazing, but if you're right now, you could sell that pick pretty high on teams like, you never know, because as the season goes on, if Calgary ends up being good, Montreal's not going to want to trade it. But if Calgary ends up being bad, that pick value is going to tank, right? As long as Florida's also doing good. So there's a bunch of moving parts, but I think if Montreal is ready to make a trade, this could be that little juicy bit that might just put them over the edge. That'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. Thank you all for supporting every single day and for liking, commenting, and subscribing on every single video. I've been your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one.